Everyone at Blackstone Security laughed when 67-year-old Marcus Chen applied for the tactical response position. But when the crisis commander saw the faded tattoo on his wrist during the worst emergency in the company's history, those same people realized they'd been mocking a living legend. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead in the sterile waiting room of Blackstone Security's corporate headquarters, casting harsh shadows across Marcus Chen's weathered face. At 67, he sat with the straight-backed posture that decades of military service had burned into his bones, his calloused hands folded precisely in his lap. The crisp white shirt and black tie he'd chosen for the interview felt foreign against skin that had grown accustomed to tactical gear and desert camouflage. Around him, younger applicants shifted nervously in their seats, most of them fresh-faced men and women in their 20s and 30s, all competing for the same position he was after. They kept stealing glances at him, their expressions ranging from curious to barely concealed amusement. He could practically hear their thoughts. What's the old man doing here? Shouldn't he be retired, playing golf somewhere? Marcus had heard it all before. Ever since his mandatory retirement from active duty 2 years ago, every job interview had been the same dance. Polite smiles, questions about his current physical capabilities, and thinly veiled concerns about whether someone his age could keep up with the demands of modern security work. The irony wasn't lost on him that he could still outrun, outshoot, and outthink most men half his age, but nobody seemed interested in finding that out. The receptionist, a young woman with perfectly manicured nails, called out names with mechanical efficiency. Johnson, report to conference room A. Williams, conference room B. When she reached his name, her voice carried just the slightest hint of confusion, as if she couldn't quite believe it was real. Chen, conference room C. He stood slowly, not because he needed to, but because sudden movements tended to make people his age look desperate. The walk down the hallway felt like a gauntlet, past glass-walled offices where employees paused their work to watch him pass. Their expressions were a mixture of curiosity and poorly concealed skepticism. More than a few exchanged meaningful looks with their colleagues, the kind of silent communication that said, "Can you believe they're actually interviewing Grandpa?" Conference room C was a stark windowless space dominated by a polished metal table. 3 people sat on the far side, their files and laptops arranged with military precision. The woman in the center, who appeared to be in her early 40s, had the sharp, no-nonsense look of someone who'd climbed the corporate ladder through competence rather than charm. Her nameplate read Director Sarah Walsh. To her left sat a younger man whose expensive suit couldn't quite hide the fact that he'd probably never seen real action. And to her right, a woman taking notes with the focused intensity of someone whose job was to find reasons to say no. "Mr. Chen," Director Walsh began, her voice professionally neutral, "thank you for coming in today. I have to say, your application caught our attention." The pause that followed suggested it hadn't caught their attention in a good way. "You're applying for a position on our tactical response team, which typically involves high-stress situations, physical demands, and the ability to make split-second decisions under pressure." Marcus nodded once, sharp and precise. "Yes, ma'am, I understand the requirements." The young man to Walsh's left leaned forward slightly, consulting his notes with theatrical concern. "Mr. Chen, it says here you're 67 years old. Our insurance company has some concerns about liability issues with operatives over 65. Can you help us understand why you believe you're still suited for this type of work?" There it was. The question he'd been expecting, phrased with just enough corporate politeness to avoid being outright discriminatory, but loaded with assumptions about his capabilities. Marcus had learned that getting defensive only confirmed their suspicions, so he kept his voice level and professional. "I maintained peak physical condition throughout my 30-year military career and continue to do so in retirement. My last fitness evaluation exceeded standards for men 20 years younger." Age has given me experience and judgment that can't be taught in any training program. The note-taker scribbled something that probably wasn't complimentary. Director Walsh flipped through his file, her expression carefully neutral. Your military record is certainly impressive. Special operations, multiple deployments, commendations. For valor, but that was military work. Corporate security is different. We deal with white-collar crime, executive protection, cyber threats. It's not exactly the same skill set. Marcus felt the familiar frustration building in his chest, but he kept it buried. They were looking at his age and seeing limitation instead of experience, frailty instead of wisdom. They couldn't see past the gray hair and the lines around. His eyes to recognize what 30 years of the world's most dangerous work had taught him. With respect, ma'am, the fundamentals of threat assessment, tactical planning, and crisis management are universal. Whether you're protecting a convoy in Afghanistan or an executive in downtown Chicago, the principles remain the same. Read the environment, anticipate problems, neutralize threats before they escalate. The young man exchanged a glance with the note-taker that suggested they'd already made their decision. Mr. Chen, we appreciate your service, we really do. But we have to be realistic about the physical demands of this position. Our tactical team might need to pursue suspects on foot, climb fences, engage in physical confrontations. Are you confident you can handle that kind of activity? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Marcus looked at the three faces. Across the table, seeing the polite skepticism that had become so familiar. They weren't really asking about his physical capabilities. They were asking him to admit that he was too old, too slow, too broken down to be useful anymore. They wanted him to excuse himself from consideration and save them the awkwardness of rejecting him outright. Instead, Marcus straightened in his chair and met Director Walsh's gaze directly. Ma'am, I've been handling physical confrontations since before any of your current operatives were born. I've pursued enemies through mountain terrain, urban environments, and desert wastelands. I've neutralized threats in conditions that would send most people running for cover. Age hasn't changed my ability to do the job, it's refined it. The note-taker's pen moved across the paper with increased urgency, probably documenting what she perceived as an old man's delusions of competence. The young man looked like he was suppressing a smile, as if Marcus had just confirmed every stereotype about aging veterans who couldn't accept their diminished capabilities. Director Walsh closed his file with the finality of someone ending a conversation. Mr. Chen, we'll be in touch. Thank you for your time today. The dismissal was polite, but unmistakable. Marcus stood, shook hands with each of them, and walked out of conference room C with the same measured dignity he'd brought in. But as he made his way back down the hallway, past the same curious stares and barely concealed smirks, he felt the weight of every rejection, every polite dismissal, every assumption about what a man his age could or couldn't accomplish. In the elevator, a young security guard who'd been watching the interviews made small talk. Rough day for interviews, huh? I saw some of the applicants. That older guy seemed pretty out of place. The guard chuckled. I mean, what's he thinking? This isn't exactly retirement home security. Marcus said nothing, but his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. The faded tattoo on his wrist, usually hidden beneath his sleeve, seemed to burn against his skin like a reminder of everything these people couldn't see, couldn't understand, and weren't interested in learning. The rejection email arrived 3 days later, wrapped in corporate language that managed to be both apologetic and condescending. While we were impressed by your extensive military background, we have decided to move forward with candidates whose profiles more closely align with our current operational requirements. Marcus deleted it without finishing the second paragraph. It was the fourth rejection in 6 weeks, each one following the same predictable pattern. Initial interest in his credentials, followed by thinly veiled concerns about his age. Then the polite dismissal disguised as careful consideration of organizational Fit. The message was always the same: impressive resume, but you're too old for real work. Marcus sat in the small apartment he'd rented after selling the house where he'd planned to spend retirement with Linda. The silence was oppressive in a way that combat zones had never been. At least in Afghanistan, the quiet meant safety. Here, it just meant emptiness. The walls were bare, except for a single framed photograph of his unit from their final deployment, 12 men who'd trusted him to bring them home safely. He'd succeeded then. Now he couldn't even convince a corporate security firm that he was worth hiring. The phone rang, cutting through his brooding. The caller ID showed his daughter's number, and Marcus considered letting it go to voicemail. Jenny's calls had become exercises in gentle manipulation, each conversation carefully steering toward the same conclusion. Maybe it was time to accept that his working days were over. "Hey, Dad." Jenny's voice carried the forced cheerfulness of someone delivering bad news. "How's the job search going?" Marcus stared out the window at the parking lot below, watching younger men load equipment into company trucks with the easy confidence of people who'd never been told they were past their prime. "Still looking. Dad, listen. Mike and I have been talking, and we think maybe you should consider some of the other options we discussed. There are some really nice retirement communities here in Florida, and you could be close to the grandkids. You've earned the right to relax." The word relax hit him like a physical blow. 30 years of service, and now his own daughter thought he should shuffle off to play shuffleboard and wait to die. "I'm not ready to retire, Jenny. I'm 67, not 97. I know, Dad, but you've been trying for months. Maybe the market is telling you something. These companies, they have insurance concerns, liability issues. It's not personal, but it was personal. Every dismissive glance, every polite rejection, every assumption about his capabilities felt like a judgment on his worth as a human being. He'd spent 3 decades earning respect through competence and courage, only to discover that civilian life measured value by birth date rather than accomplishment. After ending the call, Marcus walked to his small home office where he kept his military records and commendations. The citations read like something from another lifetime: extraordinary heroism under fire, exceptional leadership in combat operations, tactical brilliance that saved countless lives. The man described in these documents seemed like a stranger. Now, someone whose expertise and judgment had been essential to national security, but apparently meant nothing to corporate America. His laptop chimed with a new email notification. Marcus almost ignored it, expecting another automated rejection or perhaps a spam message about senior discounts. Instead, the sender was Thomas Rodriguez, a former sergeant from his old unit who now worked as a supervisor at Blackstone Security. The subject line read, "Opportunity, time sensitive." The message was brief and cryptic. "Marcus, heard through the grapevine you interviewed here last week. Can't discuss details over email, but there might be something coming up that's right in your wheelhouse. Coffee tomorrow? The usual place." Tommy. Marcus frowned at the screen. Tommy Rodriguez had been one of his best non-commissioned officers, a street-smart kid from Detroit who'd evolved into a natural leader under Marcus's guidance. If Tommy was reaching out, it meant he'd heard about the interview and probably knew it hadn't gone well. The prospect of pity from his former subordinate made Marcus's stomach turn, but curiosity won out over pride. The next morning, Marcus arrived at the diner 10 minutes early, a habit that decades of military punctuality had made automatic. Tommy was already there, looking older than his 43 years, but still carrying himself with the alert confidence of someone who'd seen real action. He stood to shake hands, and Marcus noted the firm grip and direct eye contact that distinguished veterans from civilians. "You look good, boss," Tommy said, using the old nickname despite the fact that they were both civilians now. "Staying in shape, I see." "Someone has to," Marcus replied, settling into the booth across from his former sergeant. "Your email sounded mysterious." Tommy glanced around the diner, confirming they weren't being overheard. I heard about your interview with Walsh's team. Word is they passed on you because of age concerns. The confirmation stung, even though Marcus had expected it. Nothing I haven't heard before. Corporate America has decided I'm past my expiration date. That's their loss and their stupidity, Tommy said with genuine anger. Do you know what I told them when they asked me about you during their background check? I said you were the best tactical mind I'd ever served under, that you could read situations like other people read books, and that any company smart enough to hire you would be getting 30 years of irreplaceable experience. Marcus felt a surge of gratitude for his former sergeant's loyalty, but it was tempered by the reality of rejection. Apparently, that wasn't enough to overcome their insurance concerns. Tommy leaned forward, lowering his voice. Here's the thing, boss. I work in a different division now, industrial security and crisis management. We handle the jobs that are too complex or too dangerous for the regular corporate teams. Government contracts, international clients, situations where experience matters more than youth. And there's something coming. I can't give you details yet, but it's the kind of problem that needs someone who's seen real combat, someone who can think strategically under pressure. Walsh's pretty boys with their corporate training wouldn't last 5 minutes. Marcus studied his former sergeant's face, reading the mix of respect and genuine concern. Why are you telling me this? Tommy, if your company already decided I'm too old, why would this be different? Tommy smiled grimly. Because this won't be up to Walsh's team. When this thing breaks, and it will break soon, they're going to need someone who knows what real danger looks like. Someone who's been tested under fire and proven themselves when everything was on the line. Age won't matter when lives are at stake. The diner's breakfast crowd bustled around them, civilians going about their normal routines, blissfully unaware that their safety often depended on people like Marcus and Tommy making hard decisions in impossible situations. Marcus felt a familiar stirring, the same sense of purpose that had driven him through 3 decades of military service. What kind of situation are we talking about? Marcus asked. Tommy shook his head. Can't say yet, but keep your phone on and your gear ready. When it happens, you'll know. And Marcus, don't let these corporate idiots convince you that you're washed up. The best operators aren't the youngest ones. They're the ones who've survived long enough to learn wisdom along with skill. As they parted ways in the parking lot, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in months: anticipation. Whatever was coming, it would be a chance to prove that age was just a number, that experience mattered more than appearances, and that the man described in those military citations was still very much alive. The call came at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, jarring Marcus from the light sleep that had become his norm since retirement. The sharp electronic chirp of his secure phone cut through the darkness of his apartment, and he was instantly alert, muscle memory from countless midnight deployments taking over. He reached for the device without fumbling, his hand steady despite being awakened from deep sleep. Chen, he answered, his voice clear and professional. Boss, it's Tommy. We need you here now. Something's gone sideways at the Meridian Complex, and it's escalating fast. Rodriguez's voice carried the tight control of someone managing a crisis. How quickly can you get to Blackstone? Marcus was already pulling on clothes, the phone cradled against his shoulder. 20 minutes. What's the situation? Can't discuss it over the phone. Just get here. And boss? Bring your full kit. The line went dead. Marcus stared at the phone for a moment, processing the implications. Tommy wouldn't have called unless the situation was genuinely critical. And the mention of bringing his full kit meant this wasn't a routine security matter. Marcus moved through his apartment with practiced efficiency, gathering equipment he'd hoped never to need again. The drive to Blackstone Security took him through empty downtown streets, past darkened office buildings and closed storefronts. Emergency vehicles screamed past in the opposite direction, their lights painting the night in urgent reds and blues. Whatever was happening at the Meridian Complex, it was big enough to mobilize half the city's first responders. Blackstone's headquarters was transformed when he arrived. The parking lot buzzed with activity as employees who'd been called in from home hurried toward the building. Emergency response vehicles crowded the space normally reserved for executive parking. Through the glass front doors, Marcus could see people moving with the controlled urgency that meant a major crisis was unfolding. Tommy met him at the security checkpoint, his face grim under the harsh fluorescent lighting. "Elevators waiting. I'll brief you on the way up." As they rode toward the executive floors, Tommy outlined the situation in clipped military phrases. Meridian Complex houses 3 major corporations and a federal research facility. At 11:30 p.m., armed hostiles breached the building's security perimeter. Current estimate is 12 to 15 attackers, all highly trained, all heavily armed. They've taken control of the 32nd floor, where Nexus Dynamics conducts classified defense research. Marcus felt his mind shifting into tactical mode. The familiar calm that had served him through dozens of high-stakes operations. Hostages? 43 employees were working late on a rush project. The attackers have communications jamming in place, so we don't know their status. But we have to assume they're all at risk. The elevator opened onto chaos. The executive conference room had been converted into a command center, with multiple screens showing building schematics, security feeds, and tactical overlays. Director Walsh stood at the center of it all, coordinating with federal agents, police commanders, and her own security teams. Her earlier confidence had been replaced by the strained expression of someone discovering that real crises didn't follow corporate protocols. "Rodriguez, what's our ETA on the tactical assessment?" Walsh called out without looking up from a map of the building's layout. "Director, this is Marcus Chen," Tommy said, stepping forward with Marcus beside him, "the consultant I mentioned." Walsh glanced up, and Marcus saw recognition flicker across her face, followed immediately by confusion and annoyance. "Mr. Chen? What's he doing here?" "This is a classified operation. Ma'am, with respect, we need his expertise," Tommy pressed. "This situation requires someone with experience in hostage rescue and counter-terrorism operations." Marcus has 30 years of special operations background. "We have federal agents handling this," Walsh replied curtly. "The FBI's hostage rescue team is en route. We don't need civilian consultants, especially ones who couldn't pass our basic screening process." The dismissal hit Marcus like a physical blow, but he kept his expression neutral. Around the room, other Blackstone employees had paused there, worked to listen, their faces showing the same mixture of curiosity and skepticism he'd encountered during his interview. Even in the middle of a genuine crisis, they couldn't see past his age to recognize his qualifications. Special Agent Jennifer Carter, the FBI team leader coordinating the federal response, looked up from her tactical display. "How long until HRT arrives?" 45 minutes, replied one of her subordinates. "They're flying in from Quantico." "Too long," Carter muttered, studying the building schematics. "These aren't random criminals." The breach was too clean, too coordinated. They knew exactly where to go and how to get there. Every minute we wait gives them more time to execute whatever they're planning. Marcus studied the tactical displays from his position near the wall, his trained eye immediately identifying problems with the current approach. The building's layout created natural choke points that favored defenders, but the emergency response teams were treating it like a standard barricade situation. They were missing critical vulnerabilities in the attacker's position and overlooking tactical advantages that experience would have revealed immediately. "Director Walsh," Agent Carter continued, "we need someone who knows that building inside and out. Every access point, every security measure, every potential weakness the attackers might exploit. Walsh gestured toward her team of corporate security officers. My people know the facility. Johnson here has been head of building security for 3 years. Johnson, a competent-looking man in his 30s, stepped forward with a tablet displaying building plans. Ma'am, we've identified 17 possible entry points the attackers could have used. Standard protocol suggests. Standard protocol just got 43 people taken hostage. Agent Carter interrupted. We need someone who thinks like an attacker, not like a security guard. Marcus watched the exchange with growing frustration. The people in this room were competent professionals, but they were approaching an extraordinary situation with ordinary thinking. They were following protocols designed for conventional threats, not for the kind of sophisticated operation that was unfolding at the Meridian Complex. The main screen flickered to life, with a live feed from police helicopters circling the building. The 32nd floor was dark, except for occasional flashes of light, suggesting the attackers were using night vision equipment. Smoke drifted from broken windows, indicating they'd deployed some kind of concealment measures. Most troubling, there had been no communication from inside the building since the initial breach. They're jamming all frequencies, reported the communications specialist. Whatever they're doing in there, they don't want us to know about it. Agent Carter studied the helicopter feed with visible concern. This isn't a hostage situation. This is an extraction operation. They're after something specific, and they're willing to kill to get it. Walsh's face went pale as the implications sank in. The research facility houses classified defense projects. If they access the wrong files, they could compromise national security, Carter finished. We need to move now, before they complete their mission and disappear. Marcus stepped forward, unable to remain silent any longer. Agent Carter, with your permission, I'd like to review the tactical situation. Carter looked at him with interest, noting his bearing and the way he'd addressed her with military courtesy. You're military? 30 years special operations. Hostage rescue, counterterrorism, strategic infiltration. I've run operations in environments exactly like this. Walsh started to object, but Carter raised a hand to silence her. Show me what you see. Marcus approached the tactical display, his mind automatically processing angles of attack, fields of fire, and strategic vulnerabilities. What he saw made his blood run cold. The attackers weren't just professionals. They were exceptional professionals. And everyone in this room was underestimating them. They're not planning to escape, Marcus said quietly. They're planning to destroy the evidence of what they've taken, along with everyone who might have seen them do it. The room fell silent as the full horror of the situation became clear. This wasn't just a theft or even a hostage crisis. It was a massacre in the making, and conventional tactics wouldn't be enough to stop it. Agent Carter stared at the tactical display, her jaw tightening as Marcus's assessment sank in. Explain your reasoning. Marcus pointed to the building schematic, his finger tracing the attacker's probable route. Look at their entry point. They didn't choose the path of least resistance, they chose the path that gave them control of the building's emergency systems, fire suppression, elevator controls, communication hubs. That's not theft methodology. That's scorched earth. Director. Walsh stepped closer to the display, her corporate confidence wavering. You're saying they plan to kill the hostages? I'm saying they plan to eliminate witnesses and destroy evidence. The jamming equipment, the smoke deployment, the systematic isolation of the 32nd floor. These aren't stalling tactics. They're preparation for a clean exit that leaves no loose ends. The FBI's tactical specialist, a young agent named Morrison, pulled up additional feeds from the building's security system. Sir, we're getting reports of unusual activity in the building's lower levels. Maintenance areas that shouldn't have any personnel. Agent Carter studied the new information with growing alarm. They're rigging the building. Secondary teams are placing charges while the primary team extracts intelligence from the research facility. Marcus nodded grimly. Classic special operations doctrine. Multiple teams, coordinated timing, complete objective achievement, followed by total psych denial. When they're finished, that entire floor will be reduced to rubble. The room erupted in controlled chaos as the implications became clear. Federal agents began coordinating with bomb disposal units while Blackstone personnel frantically tried to contact anyone inside the building. Walsh grabbed her radio, demanding updates from her security teams positioned around the perimeter. All units, report status of evacuation procedures for surrounding buildings, Agent Carter ordered. If they're planning to bring down 30 floors of office space, we need to clear a 6-block radius. One of Carter's subordinates looked up from his communication console, his face pale. Ma'am, HRT is still 20 minutes out. Even if we start evacuating now, we can't clear the area and stop the attack before they complete their mission. Marcus watched the federal response unfold with the detached assessment of someone who'd seen bureaucracy fail under pressure countless times. They were following protocols designed for conventional threats, mobilizing resources for a textbook response to a situation that demanded improvisation and speed. Agent Carter, Marcus said quietly, your people are planning a siege response to a time-sensitive extraction. By the time HRT arrives, establishes a perimeter, and begins negotiations, those hostages will be dead and half the city block will be compromised. Carter turned to face him, and Marcus could see the calculation in her eyes. She was weighing protocol against results, procedure against lives. What would you recommend? Before Marcus could answer, Director Walsh stepped between them. Agent Carter, Mr. Chen is not a federal employee or a Blackstone contractor. He has no security clearance for this operation and no authority to make tactical recommendations. Director Walsh, Carter replied with icy professionalism. This is a federal investigation involving national security. I'll consult with whoever I believe can provide valuable intelligence. Walsh's face flushed, but she stepped back. Around the room, Marcus could feel the attention of every person present. The young security officers who'd smirked at his interview application, the corporate executives who dismissed him as too old for their company, the federal agents who'd never heard his name, all of them were now waiting to hear what the supposedly obsolete veteran had to say. Marcus approached the main tactical display, studying the building layout with the focused intensity that had made him legendary among his peers. The attackers made one critical error. They assumed standard law enforcement response, which means they planned for a 45-minute to 2-hour window before serious opposition arrives. That's exactly what we're giving them, Agent Morrison observed. Not if we compress their timeline, Marcus replied. They're operating on military precision, which means they have contingency plans for early detection, but not for immediate, professional counter-assault. We hit them now, before they can adapt their strategy. Agent Carter studied Marcus's bearing, noting the calm confidence and tactical vocabulary that marked genuine special operations experience. You're talking about going in without backup, without full intelligence, against an unknown number of professionally trained hostiles. I'm talking about doing what special operations forces do, improvising solutions when conventional approaches fail. Marcus turned to face the room. Those attackers are good, but they're not invisible. They've made assumptions about response, time and capability that we can exploit. Walsh stepped forward again, her voice rising with frustration. This is insane. You're talking about sending a 67-year-old man into a combat situation against trained terrorists. It's suicide, and it's liability that this company cannot accept. The room fell silent at her words. Marcus felt the familiar sting of age discrimination, even in the middle of a crisis where lives hung in the balance. Around him, he could see federal agents and security personnel processing Walsh's objection, weighing his age against his claimed expertise. Agent Morrison consulted his tablet, pulling up personnel files. Sir, Mr. Chen's military record shows extensive counterterrorism experience, but his last active deployment was 3 years ago. Are we sure he's still capable of this kind of operation? The question hung in the air like an accusation. Marcus looked around the room at faces that showed varying degrees of doubt, skepticism, and concern. They were looking at his gray hair and lined face, calculating whether someone his age could possibly execute the kind of mission he was proposing. "Agent Carter," Marcus said quietly, "I understand the concerns about my age and current capabilities. But I also understand that in 18 minutes, 43 innocent people are going to die because everyone in this room is more worried about liability than about results." Tommy Rodriguez stepped forward from his position near the wall. "Agent Carter, I served under Marcus Chen for 6 years in Afghanistan and Iraq. I've seen him plan and execute operations that saved hundreds of lives. Age hasn't changed his tactical mind or his ability to read a situation." "That was military operations," Walsh countered. "This is a civilian environment with different rules, different constraints. We can't just send someone in shooting and hope for the best." Marcus felt his patience finally reaching its limit. For months, he'd endured polite rejections and carefully worded dismissals, all based on assumptions about what someone his age could or couldn't accomplish. Now, with lives at stake and time running out, the same prejudices were preventing him from doing what he did best. Agent Carter's radio crackled with an update from the perimeter teams. "Command, we're seeing increased activity on the 32nd floor. Multiple heat signatures moving toward what appears to be a central location. Whatever they're planning, it looks like they're entering the final phase." The urgency in the radio operator's voice cut through the room's debate like a blade. Marcus could see Agent Carter making calculations, weighing risks against alternatives, protocol against necessity. Around her, federal agents waited for orders while Blackstone personnel struggled with the reality that their corporate security measures had failed catastrophically. "Ma'am," Agent Morrison said quietly, "HRT is still 15 minutes out. If Mr. Chen is right about the timeline, we're going to lose everyone in that building." Carter looked at Marcus with the intense scrutiny of someone making a decision that could end careers or save lives. "Mr. Chen, if I authorize this operation, can you guarantee results?" Marcus met her gaze without flinching. "Agent Carter, I can guarantee that doing nothing will definitely get those people killed. Taking action gives them a chance." Agent Carter studied Marcus for a long moment, her trained eye taking in details that the corporate executives had missed. His posture, the way he processed information, the calm certainty in his voice when discussing tactical operations. These weren't the traits of someone whose skills had diminished with age. They were the markers of experience refined by decades of high-stakes decision-making. "Morrison, pull up the building's structural plans," Carter ordered. "I want to know every access point, every service corridor, every potential route to the 32nd floor that doesn't involve the main elevators." Director Walsh stepped forward, her face flushed with anger. "Agent Carter, I'm formally objecting to this course of action. Blackstone Security cannot and will not authorize the use of an unvetted civilian contractor in an active hostage situation." "The liability alone, Director Walsh," Carter interrupted, her voice cutting through the corporate doublespeak like ice. "This is a federal operation involving national security. Your company's liability concerns are noted and irrelevant." Marcus moved to the tactical display, his mind already processing the building's layout with the systematic approach that had kept him alive through hundreds of dangerous missions. The Meridian Complex was a modern high-rise, all glass and steel, designed more for aesthetics than security. But every building had vulnerabilities if you knew how to look for them. "The service elevator shaft," Marcus said, pointing to a narrow corridor on the building schematic. "It runs parallel to the main elevator bank, but has access points on every floor. The attackers wouldn't have bothered securing it because standard law enforcement wouldn't know to use it." Agent Morrison highlighted the route on his tablet. That shaft connects to the building's maintenance level. If someone could access it from the parking garage, they'd have a direct route to any floor without using the compromised main elevators, Marcus finished. The attackers are monitoring the primary access points, but they can't watch everything. Carter nodded slowly, seeing the tactical picture develop. What about their positioning on the 32nd floor? If you get up there, how do you engage an unknown number of hostiles without getting the hostages killed? Marcus studied the floor plan of the research facility, noting the arrangement of offices, laboratories, and common areas. His mind automatically calculated fields of fire, cover, positions, and optimal approach angles. It was like reading a familiar language, one he'd been fluent in for 3 decades. They've centralized the hostages, he said, pointing to the main conference room. Standard procedure for controlling a large group. That means most of their personnel are concentrated in one area, leaving the perimeter less defended. A single operator could create enough confusion to force them to split their attention. A single operator against 12 to 15 professionals? Agent Morrison's voice carried clear skepticism. That's not tactics, that's suicide. Marcus looked at the young agent with the patience of someone who'd heard similar objections from inexperienced personnel countless times. Agent Morrison, the goal isn't to engage all of them simultaneously. It's to disrupt their operation, force them to react to threats they weren't expecting, and create opportunities for the hostages to escape or for follow-up forces to exploit. Tommy Rodriguez stepped forward, consulting his own tablet. Boss, I've been monitoring their communications jamming. It's sophisticated, but it has limitations. If you could get close enough to plant a signal booster, we might be able to re-establish contact with anyone inside. Communications are secondary, Marcus replied. The primary objective is preventing them from completing their mission and eliminating the hostages. Everything else is ancillary. Director Walsh shook her head in frustration. This entire conversation is academic. Mr. Chen doesn't have the equipment, the backup, or the authorization to attempt this kind of operation. We're talking about fantasy, not reality. Marcus reached into the tactical bag he'd brought from his apartment, withdrawing items that made several people in the room step back involuntarily. Body armor, communications equipment, tactical weapons, all maintained in perfect condition. Despite his official retirement, the gear bore the quiet functionality of equipment chosen by someone who understood the difference between looking impressive and staying alive. I maintain full operational readiness, Marcus said simply. It's a habit that served me well. Agent Carter examined the equipment with professional interest. Military-grade gear, not the flashy tactical equipment favored by wannabes and weekend warriors. Everything was worn but immaculately maintained, showing the care of someone who'd trusted his life to these tools. The building's security systems, Marcus continued. Do they include thermal imaging on the 32nd floor? Morrison consulted his tablet. Limited coverage, but yes. The research facility has enhanced security measures including thermal sensors in sensitive areas. Can you access those feeds remotely? Probably, but it would take time to bypass their jamming. Then don't bypass it, Marcus interrupted. Work around it. Route the signal through the building's fire safety network. They wouldn't have jammed emergency systems because they need them functional for their own escape. Carter and Morrison exchanged glances, recognizing the kind of innovative thinking that came from someone who'd solved similar problems under pressure. Walsh, however, remained fixated on protocol and procedure. Agent Carter, I'm formally requesting that the FBI assume full responsibility for any actions taken by Mr. Chen, Walsh declared. Blackstone Security will not be held liable for the consequences of this unauthorized operation. Your objection is noted, Carter replied tersely. Mr. Chen, how long do you need to reach the 32nd floor? Marcus calculated timing based on the building's layout and the route he'd identified. 12 minutes to access the service elevator. 3 minutes to reach the target floor. 2 minutes to assess the situation and begin engagement. That puts you in position just as they're entering what we believe is their final phase, Carter observed. No margin for error, no backup plan if something goes wrong. Agent Carter, Marcus said, meeting her eyes directly. There's always margin for error when you know what you're doing. The question is whether you're willing to trust experience over procedure. Around the room, federal agents and corporate security personnel watched the exchange with varying degrees of fascination and concern. They were witnessing a debate between conventional wisdom and operational innovation, between doing things the safe way and doing them the effective way. Carter's radio crackled with another update from the perimeter teams. Command were detecting what might be explosive charges being positioned in the building's lower levels. If they detonate, the structural damage could affect multiple floors. The news sent a chill through the room. Marcus had been right about the attackers' intentions. They weren't planning to leave witnesses or evidence behind. The 43 hostages weren't just at risk of being killed. They were at risk of being buried under tons of concrete and steel. Agent Carter, Marcus said quietly. In about 10 minutes, this stops being a hostage rescue and becomes a recovery operation. The choice is yours. Carter looked around the room at her agents, at the corporate executives, at the tactical displays showing a situation that was rapidly deteriorating beyond conventional solutions. When she spoke, her voice carried the authority of someone who'd made the hardest decision of her career. Mr. Chen, you have authorization to proceed. All support units, prepare for immediate tactical operation. Director Walsh opened her mouth to object again, but Carter's expression stopped her cold. The decision had been made, and within minutes, a 67-year-old man who'd been rejected as too old for corporate security work would be attempting something that trained federal agents weren't prepared to handle. Marcus checked his equipment. One final time, his movements economical and practiced. Somewhere above them, 43 people were counting on someone to save them, even though they had no idea help was coming. Marcus moved through the parking garage with the fluid silence of someone who'd spent decades perfecting the art of invisible. Approach. The concrete structure was dimly lit, shadows pooling between support columns and parked vehicles. Emergency lighting cast everything in harsh angles, creating a maze of concealment that he navigated with practiced ease. The service elevator access point was exactly where the building schematics indicated, hidden behind a maintenance door that required a security code. Marcus examined the electronic lock for 30 seconds before producing a small device from his tactical kit. The bypass tool was military-grade equipment, designed for situations where conventional access wasn't available. And time was critical. The lock disengaged with a soft click. Marcus slipped through the door and found himself in a narrow corridor that ran parallel to the main elevator shaft. The space was cramped, designed for maintenance workers rather than tactical operations, but it would serve his purpose. Service. Ladders provided access to higher floors, and the shaft's acoustic properties would mask the sound of his movement. As he began his ascent, Marcus's earpiece crackled with updates from the command center. Agent Carter's voice was tense but controlled as she coordinated the federal response. All units, maintain perimeter. Do not approach the building until Mr. Chen reports contact. The climb to the 32nd floor took exactly the time Marcus had calculated. His breathing remained steady despite the physical exertion, testimony to the fitness regimen he'd maintained throughout retirement. Each floor passed in measured intervals, his movements economical and silent. At the 28th floor, he paused to check his equipment and reassess the tactical situation. Through the building's structure, he could hear faint sounds of activity from above, voices speaking in what sounded like a foreign language, the mechanical noise of equipment being moved, the occasional electronic beep that suggested sophisticated technology in operation. "Command, this is Chen," he whispered into his microphone. "Approaching target floor. Confirm thermal readings." Agent Morrison's voice came through the earpiece with real-time intelligence. "Chen, thermal shows approximately 14 heat signatures. On the 32nd floor. 12 appear to be clustered in the main conference room. That's your hostages. 2 signatures are mobile, likely guards." Marcus processed the information while continuing his ascent. 14 attackers was within the range he'd estimated, but their positioning suggested they were more confident than cautious. The mobile guards indicated they were maintaining security protocols, but the concentration of personnel in one area suggested they weren't expecting immediate threats. The service elevator access for the 32nd floor was located in a maintenance alcove 20 meters from the main research facility entrance. Marcus emerged from the shaft with the careful precision of someone entering hostile territory. The hallway was dark, except for emergency lighting, and the air carried the acrid smell of electronic equipment and something else, the metallic tang of explosives. Through his earpiece, Tommy Rodriguez's voice provided crucial intelligence. "Boss, building security shows they've disabled the fire suppression system on your floor. They don't want anything interfering with their operation." Marcus acknowledged the information while moving along the corridor toward the research facility. The attackers had been thorough in their preparation, but their focus on the primary mission had created the tactical blind spots he'd predicted. They were watching the main approaches while leaving secondary access points less defended. The first guard appeared around a corner 30 meters ahead, moving with the alert competence of professional military personnel. Marcus observed him for 15 seconds, noting his equipment, positioning, and patrol pattern. The man was carrying an assault rifle and wearing tactical gear that suggested special operations training, but his movement patterns indicated he wasn't expecting immediate contact. Marcus withdrew a specialized device from his kit, a sound suppressor designed for close-quarters engagement. The tool was illegal for civilian use, but standard equipment for someone with his military background and security clearance. He approached the guard from behind, using support columns and equipment cabinets for concealment. The engagement lasted 3 seconds. The guard went down without making a sound, his weapon secured before his unconscious body hit the floor. Marcus checked the man's pulse, alive but incapacitated, exactly as intended. Killing wasn't necessary when neutralization achieved the same tactical objective. "Command, 1 hostile neutralized," Marcus reported quietly. "Proceeding toward hostage location." Agent Carter's voice carried a mixture of relief and tension. "Copy that, Chen. Thermal shows the second mobile signature is moving toward your position. Estimate contact in 90 seconds. Marcus dragged the unconscious guard into a maintenance closet and appropriated his radio equipment. The device was encrypted, but military-grade communication systems followed predictable patterns. Within moments, he was monitoring the attackers' internal communications, listening to updates in accented English that confirmed his assessment of their timeline. "Alpha Team, status report," came a voice through the captured radio. "Package secured. Ready for extraction in 12 minutes, replied another voice. "Bravo Team, confirmed demolition charges are positioned. Charges set on floors 28 through 35. Remote detonation ready on your command." Marcus felt his blood run cold at the confirmation. The attackers weren't just planning to eliminate the hostages, they were preparing to bring down 7 floors of the building, ensuring that any evidence of their operation would be buried under tons of rubble. The scope of destruction would kill hundreds of people in the surrounding area. "Command, priority update," Marcus whispered urgently into his microphone. "They've rigged multiple floors with demolition charges. Evacuation radius needs to expand immediately." Agent Carter's response was immediate and sharp. "Copy that. All Units, emergency evacuation protocol for a 6-block radius. This is not a drill. The second guard appeared at the end of the corridor, moving toward the position where his partner should have been. Marcus observed his approach while calculating engagement options. This guard was more alert, his weapon raised and ready, suggesting he'd noticed something amiss with the radio silence from his colleague. Marcus positioned himself behind a structural column and waited. The guard called out softly in the foreign language, probably asking for a status report. When no response came, the man's posture shifted from routine patrol to active investigation. He began moving more carefully, his weapon trained on potential threats. The engagement was more complex this time. The guard was prepared for trouble, his training evident in the way he cleared corners and maintained tactical awareness. Marcus waited until the man passed his position before moving, using the guard's own momentum against him in a disarming technique that had been perfected through years of close-quarters combat training. The guard struggled for nearly 10 seconds before succumbing to the sleeper hold Marcus applied. Again, unconscious but alive, his equipment secured for potential use. 2 down, 12 to go, with the clock ticking toward a demolition that would kill hundreds of innocent people. "Command, second hostile neutralized," Marcus reported. "I have access to their communications. Demolition is scheduled in 10 minutes. Whatever federal response is coming, it needs to be faster." Agent Carter's voice carried the strain of someone coordinating multiple life-or-death operations simultaneously. "Chen, HRT is still 8 minutes out. Can you delay their timeline?" Marcus studied the layout of the research facility, noting the arrangement of offices and laboratories between his position and the main conference room where the hostages were being held. 12 professional operators, unknown weapons and equipment, sophisticated communications, and a demolition plan that would destroy all evidence of what was happening. "Command, I'm going to create some confusion," Marcus said, checking his remaining equipment. "When I do, those hostages need to be ready to move fast." Agent Morrison's voice cut through the radio chatter. "Chen, how do we contact the hostages? Communications are still jammed." Marcus looked at the captured radio in his hand, then at the corridor leading toward the main facility. Sometimes the simplest solutions were the most effective. Sometimes experience mattered more than technology. "You don't contact them," Marcus replied. "You trust them to recognize opportunity when they see it." He moved deeper into the facility, toward a confrontation that would prove whether 30 years of experience could overcome impossible odds. Whether a man dismissed as too old for corporate security could accomplish what an entire federal response team wasn't prepared to attempt. The real battle was about to begin. Marcus positioned himself outside the main laboratory complex, studying the facility's layout through the reinforced glass windows. Inside, he could see the organized chaos of a professional extraction operation. 12 hostages sat bound in the central conference room, their faces showing the controlled fear of people who understood their situation was desperate. Around them, armed figures moved with military precision, some guarding the captives, while others worked at computer terminals, downloading classified research data. The lead operative, a tall man with the bearing of someone accustomed to command, stood near a bank of servers, monitoring the data extraction process. His equipment was top-tier military grade, and his positioning suggested he was the tactical commander of the operation. Near him, another operative worked on what appeared to be a sophisticated timer device connected to multiple wireless transmitters, the demolition control system. Marcus activated the captured radio and listened to their communications. The voices were tense but professional, coordinating the final phases of their mission with the kind of precision that came from extensive planning and training. They spoke in a mixture of English and what sounded like Eastern European languages, confirming his assessment that this was an international operation. "Alpha 1, data extraction at 70% completion," reported one voice. Estimate: 4 minutes to full download. Copy that, replied the commander. Bravo team, confirmed demolition sequence is ready for remote activation. Charges armed and ready. Detonation in 6 minutes on your command. Marcus checked his watch against their timeline. 6 minutes until they killed 43 innocent people and destroyed 7 floors of evidence. The federal response wouldn't arrive for another 5 minutes, leaving a critical gap that only he could fill. But engaging 12 professional operators in a confined space with hostages at risk required more than courage. It required tactical brilliance. He studied the facility's emergency systems, noting the fire suppression controls, emergency lighting, and ventilation networks. The attackers had disabled the primary safety systems, but they couldn't eliminate everything without compromising their own operation. Marcus identified 3 critical vulnerabilities in their setup that experience had taught him to recognize. Command: "This is Chen," he whispered into his microphone. "I'm beginning engagement. When the situation changes, tell HRT to come in fast and ready for close quarters combat." Agent Carter's voice carried the tension of someone watching the situation spiral beyond conventional control. "Chen, you're outnumbered 12 to 1. Are you sure about this?" Marcus smiled grimly as he prepared his equipment. "Agent Carter, I've had worse odds. Trust the plan." He moved to the building's emergency control panel, using skills acquired during decades of operations in unfamiliar environments. The facility's backup systems were more accessible than the primary controls, designed for emergency personnel to operate during crisis situations. Within 90 seconds, Marcus had identified the manual overrides for the building's emergency lighting and ventilation systems. The first phase of his plan required darkness. Marcus triggered the emergency lighting shutdown, plunging the entire 32nd floor into complete blackness. Through the captured radio, he heard immediate confusion among the attackers as their carefully controlled environment suddenly became unpredictable. "What happened to the lights?" demanded one voice in accented English. "Technical malfunction," replied another. "Switch to night vision. Maintain positions." But switching to night vision required time and adjustment, creating exactly the window Marcus needed. He activated a small thermal flare and threw it into the main corridor, creating a bright heat signature that would overwhelm any night vision equipment pointed in that direction. The flare rolled across the floor, casting wild shadows and making precise targeting impossible. Through the darkness, Marcus heard the lead operative barking orders in multiple languages, trying to maintain control of a situation that was rapidly deteriorating. The professional calm that had characterized their operation was beginning to crack under the pressure of unexpected complications. Marcus moved through the darkened facility using techniques perfected in countless nighttime operations. His eyes had already adjusted to the darkness, and his muscle memory guided him through the maze of equipment and furniture. He approached the first perimeter guard from behind, a man who was struggling to activate his night vision equipment while maintaining watch over the hostages. The engagement was swift and silent. The guard went down without alerting his colleagues, his weapon secured and his radio destroyed to prevent communication. Marcus continued moving, using the confusion and darkness to approach the second perimeter position. "Alpha 2, report status," came a tense voice over the radio. No response from the neutralized guard created additional anxiety among the remaining operatives. Marcus could hear them trying to re-establish contact while maintaining their positions, their professional discipline beginning to fray under the stress of operating in an environment they no longer controlled. The second guard was more alert, his weapon raised and ready as he scanned the darkness for threats. Marcus waited until the man's attention was focused on a sound from the opposite direction before moving. This engagement was more difficult, the guard managing to call out a warning before being neutralized, but the damage to their operational security was already complete. "Contact. We have hostile contact in the facility." shouted the guard before Marcus silenced him. Immediately, the radio chatter exploded with urgent communications as the remaining operatives tried to assess the threat level and maintain control of their mission. Marcus listened to their increasingly frantic coordination while preparing the next phase of his assault. "Unknown number of hostiles in the building," reported one voice. "Request immediate tactical assessment." "Negative," replied the commander. "Mission timeline is non-negotiable. Continue data extraction. Deploy additional security to the perimeter." Marcus recognized the tactical mistake immediately. The commander was prioritizing mission completion over security, dividing his forces when he should have been consolidating them. It was the kind of error that inexperienced leaders made under pressure, and it created opportunities that Marcus was perfectly positioned to exploit. He activated the second emergency flare and rolled it toward the main conference room where the hostages were being held. The bright light created chaos among the guards, who were forced to choose between maintaining night vision capability and dealing with the overwhelming illumination. In the confusion, Marcus heard one of the hostages, a woman with a commanding voice, begin organizing the other captives. "Everyone stay low and move toward the emergency exit when I say," she called out, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to leadership. "Wait for my signal." Dr. Sarah Mitchell, Marcus realized, recognizing the voice from intelligence briefings. The research facilities director was taking advantage of the confusion to coordinate an escape attempt. Her leadership was buying him time and creating additional complications for the attackers, who now had to deal with both external threats and potentially uncontrolled hostages. "Commander, the hostages are becoming restless," reported one of the guards. "Request permission to implement control measures." "Negative. We need them alive until data extraction is complete," came the reply. "Maintain positions, but do not engage unless absolutely necessary." The commander's response revealed another critical vulnerability in their operation. They needed the hostages alive, at least temporarily, which limited their response options and gave Marcus additional tactical advantages. He could create chaos without worrying about immediate retaliation against the captives. Marcus positioned himself near the main server room where the data extraction was taking place. Through the darkness he could see the glow of computer screens and status indicators, the only reliable light sources in the facility. The technical specialist working on the download was focused entirely on his equipment, trusting his security team to handle any external threats. That trust was about to be proven fatally misplaced. Marcus prepared for the most critical phase of his assault, the direct engagement that would either save 43 lives or result in the deaths of everyone on the 32nd floor. The captured radio crackled with increasingly desperate communications as the remaining operatives tried to regain control of their compromised operation. "Alpha 1, we need those lights back online," demanded one voice. "Negative, electrical systems are compromised," replied another. "Manual override is not responding." "Time to completion on data extraction?" asked the commander, his voice showing the first signs of stress. 3 minutes, replied the technical specialist. "But if we keep getting interrupted, no interruptions." The commander cut him off. "This mission completes on schedule." Marcus smiled in the darkness. The commander's insistence on maintaining their timeline was creating exactly the pressure he needed to exploit. Within moments, he would discover whether 30 years of experience could overcome 12 professional operators in their own carefully prepared killing ground. The real test was about to begin. Marcus struck the main server room like a force of nature unleashed in controlled chaos. The technical specialist never saw him coming, focused entirely on the glowing progress bar that showed 93% completion of the data extraction. Marcus disabled him with a precise nerve strike that left the man conscious but paralyzed. His fingers frozen inches from the keyboard that could complete their mission. The sudden interruption of the download process triggered immediate alarms throughout the facility. Computer screens flashed red warnings about interrupted data streams and corrupted file transfers, while automated systems announced system failures in multiple languages. The carefully orchestrated operation began collapsing into digital chaos. Alpha 1. Data extraction has stopped, shouted the commander over the radio. What's your status? Marcus keyed the captured radio, speaking in the calm, professional tone he'd perfected during decades of psychological operations. Alpha 1 is compromised. This is Special Operations Command. You are surrounded by federal agents and have 30 seconds to surrender. The lie was perfectly crafted to exploit the attacker's worst fears. Special Operations Forces were their professional equals, trained in the same tactics and equipped with the same capabilities. The thought of facing such opposition would force them to recalculate everything they believed about their mission parameters. Impossible, came the commander's voice, but Marcus could hear the uncertainty creeping in. We would have detected any federal response. You detected what we wanted you to detect, Marcus replied, maintaining the fiction while moving through the darkened facility. Your communications have been monitored since you breached the perimeter. Every movement, every plan, every contingency, we've been 3 steps ahead of you from the beginning. The psychological warfare was working. Through the radio chatter, Marcus could hear the operatives questioning their intelligence, their planning, their chances of successful extraction. The professional confidence that had characterized their operation was fragmenting under the pressure of facing an enemy they hadn't anticipated. Dr. Sarah Mitchell's voice cut through the confusion from the conference room. Now everyone move toward the emergency exit. The hostages erupted into coordinated movement. 43 people who'd been sitting helplessly for hours suddenly taking control of their fate. Marcus heard the guards shouting orders, trying to maintain control of the situation while dealing with the threat he represented and the systematic failure of their mission. Commander, the hostages are escaping, reported one of the guards. Request permission to engage. Negative. We need them alive, came the desperate reply. Contain them, but do not fire unless absolutely necessary. Marcus used the confusion to advance on the main security position, where 3 operatives were trying to coordinate a response to multiple simultaneous threats. They'd positioned themselves behind overturned tables and equipment cabinets, creating defensive positions that would have been effective against conventional assault, but were inadequate against someone who understood their psychology and tactics. He rolled a smoke grenade into their position, filling the area with dense white fog that rendered their night vision equipment useless. In the chaos that followed, Marcus engaged the first operative with hand-to-hand combat techniques that neutralized threats without creating the noise of gunfire. The man went down fighting, skilled and dangerous, but ultimately overwhelmed by someone with more experience and better positioning. The second operative realized his colleague was down and began firing wildly into the smoke, his rounds hitting walls and equipment, but missing Marcus, who'd anticipated the panic response and positioned himself accordingly. Marcus waited for the inevitable reload pause before moving, closing the distance in the seconds when his opponent was most vulnerable. The engagement was brutal and efficient. The operative fought with the desperation of someone who understood he was losing a battle he'd expected to win easily. But desperation without discipline was just chaos, and Marcus had built his reputation on remaining calm when others panicked. Alpha Team, report status, demanded the commander over the radio. We have multiple hostiles in the facility. Marcus keyed the radio again, this time using the voice of the operative he'd just neutralized. He'd heard the man speak enough to mimic his accent and speech patterns. Alpha 3 down, Alpha 4 down. They're using some kind of advanced tactical equipment. I count at least 6 operators moving through the facility. The deception was perfect, confirming the commander's worst fears about facing a professional special operations team. Marcus could hear the panic building in the radio communications as the remaining operatives tried to process the impossibility of their situation. Through the facility's emergency lighting, Marcus could see the hostages moving in organized groups toward the emergency exits. Dr. Mitchell had maintained remarkable control over the evacuation, keeping people calm and coordinated even as gunfire echoed through the corridors. Several of the younger hostages were helping older colleagues, while others carried injured personnel who'd been hurt during the initial breach. The commander's voice crackled over the radio, strained with the realization that his mission was failing catastrophically. All units, implement immediate extraction protocol. Activate demolition charges in 60 seconds. Marcus felt his blood run cold. They were cutting their losses, abandoning the data extraction in favor of destroying all evidence of their operation. In 60 seconds, 7 floors of the building would collapse, killing not just the escaping hostages but hundreds of people in the surrounding area. "Command, this is Chen," Marcus spoke urgently into his microphone. "They're activating demolition charges, 1 minute to detonation. Get everyone back from the building now." Agent Carter's voice carried the controlled panic of someone coordinating a disaster response. "Chen, HRT is in the building. They're moving toward your position, but they can't reach the 32nd floor in time." Agent Carter stepped forward, consulting her notes with the focused intensity of someone documenting critical intelligence. "Mr. Chen, I need to understand the tactical decisions that made this operation successful. Your approach was unconventional by any standard." Marcus considered how to explain 3 decades of accumulated knowledge to people who'd learned tactics from textbooks and training scenarios. "Agent Carter, conventional approaches work against conventional threats. But these attackers were professionals who'd planned for standard law enforcement response. They hadn't planned for someone who understood their psychology and could exploit their assumptions. Their assumptions about response time, about tactical capabilities, about the kind of opposition they'd face." Carter nodded slowly. "You made them fight a battle they weren't prepared for." "I made them fight on my terms instead of theirs," Marcus corrected. "Experience teaches you that every enemy has vulnerabilities, but you have to know how to look for them." Tommy Rodriguez pushed through the crowd of officials, his face showing the mixture of pride and vindication that came from watching someone he'd served under prove their worth in the most dramatic way possible. "Boss, I told them you were the best tactical mind I'd ever served under. I don't think they believed me until tonight." Marcus clasped his former sergeant's shoulder, feeling the satisfaction of having lived up to the trust of someone whose opinion mattered. "Tommy, you put your reputation on the line for me. That kind of loyalty isn't forgotten." "Hell, boss, after what you just pulled off, I'm pretty sure my reputation is enhanced by association," Tommy replied with a grin. "Though I have to ask, how did you stay so calm when you were outnumbered 12-1? The question drew attention from everyone within earshot. Federal agents, corporate executives, rescued hostages, and emergency personnel all waited for Marcus to explain the mindset that had enabled him to function under pressure that would have overwhelmed most people. Marcus looked around at the faces watching him, seeing curiosity, respect, and the kind of professional interest that came from people who understood they were witnessing something extraordinary. The numbers don't matter when you understand the psychology. 12 opponents means 12 different decision makers, 12 different stress responses, 12 opportunities for confusion and error. One operator with a clear plan and superior positioning can exploit those opportunities. Dr. Mitchell stepped forward again, her scientific mind processing the tactical explanation. "You're talking about systems theory applied to combat operations. Multiple variables creating exponential complexity that favors the side with better information and clearer objectives." "Exactly," Marcus replied, impressed by her immediate understanding. "They had superior numbers and equipment, but I had superior intelligence about their psychology and tactical limitations." Agent Carter made notes while asking her next question. The psychological warfare component, convincing them they were facing a full special operations team instead of a single operator. That created strategic confusion that compromised their decision-making. It forced them to divide their attention and question their intelligence, Marcus confirmed. When professional operators start doubting their information, they make mistakes. I just had to be ready to exploit those mistakes when they occurred. Director Walsh stepped forward again, her expression showing the calculated assessment of someone recognizing a strategic opportunity. Mr. Chen, I think it's time for Blackstone Security to reconsider our earlier conversation about employment opportunities. The offer was predictable, but Marcus found himself less interested in vindication than in the larger implications of what had just occurred. Around him, he could see federal agents discussing new tactical protocols, security professionals questioning their assumptions about age and capability, and emergency responders recognizing that expertise came in forms they hadn't expected. Director Walsh, Marcus replied carefully, I appreciate the offer, but I think tonight demonstrated that the problem isn't where I work. The problem is how organizations like yours think about experience, capability, and the relationship between age and competence. Agent Carter looked up from her notes, recognizing the broader significance of Marcus's comment. Mr. Chen, are you suggesting that law enforcement and security agencies are systematically undervaluing experienced personnel? I'm suggesting that 43 people are alive tonight because someone looked past assumptions about age and focused on actual capability, Marcus replied. The question is whether institutions are willing to learn from that, or whether they'll treat this as an isolated incident that doesn't require changing how they evaluate personnel. The challenge in his words was unmistakable. Marcus had proven his point in the most dramatic way possible, but the real test would be whether the system that had rejected him would evolve or simply find new ways to justify their previous decisions. Dr. Mitchell stepped forward one more time, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to making important decisions. Mr. Chen, I don't know what your future plans are, but the research facility you saved tonight is going to need new security protocols. We're looking for someone who understands that the most dangerous threats are the ones nobody expects. The offer was different from Walsh's corporate calculation, carrying the genuine respect of someone who'd witnessed competence under pressure. Marcus considered the implications while watching federal agents continue their investigation, knowing that his actions tonight would influence tactical doctrine for years to come. Dr. Mitchell, he said finally, I'll consider any opportunity to continue doing work that matters. But first, I think Agent Carter, and I need to finish discussing how tonight's operation can improve federal response protocols. Carter nodded appreciatively, recognizing that Marcus was more interested in sharing knowledge than in personal recognition. Mr. Chen, the FBI would be honored to have your insights into counterterrorism tactics. What you accomplished tonight will save lives in future operations. As the crowd of officials began to disperse, Marcus remained in the damaged control room, looking down at his wrist where the sleeve had been torn during the fighting. The tattoo was clearly visible now, a small faded insignia that identified him as a member of an elite unit that had operated in shadows for 3 decades, the same tattoo that had been dismissed as irrelevant during his corporate security interview was now being photographed by federal investigators as part of the official record of an operation that would be studied and analyzed for years to come. 6 months later, Marcus Chen stood before a packed auditorium at the FBI Academy in Quantico, addressing a mixed audience of federal agents, military personnel, and corporate security executives. The same people who'd once dismissed him as too old now hung on every word as he outlined tactical principles that had been forged through decades of real-world experience. Age doesn't diminish capability, Marcus told the audience, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who'd proven his point in the most dramatic way possible. It refines it. Experience teaches you to see solutions that youth and technology miss. In the front row sat Director Walsh, taking careful notes. As the man she'd rejected outlined security protocols that Blackstone had now adopted company-wide. Beside her, Agent Carter nodded approvingly as Marcus described the psychological aspects of tactical operations that weren't covered in any training manual. Dr. Mitchell had kept her word, hiring Marcus as Director of Advanced Security for the rebuilt research facility. His first recommendation had been to recruit other, obsolete veterans whose experience was being wasted by organizations that confused age with incompetence. The tattoo on his wrist was no longer hidden beneath corporate sleeves. It had become a symbol of hidden expertise, a reminder that the most dangerous mistake any organization could make was underestimating people based on assumptions rather than evidence. Tommy Rodriguez approached after the lecture, grinning with the satisfaction of someone whose loyalty had been vindicated. "Boss, you've got 3 more job offers in your inbox. Seems like everyone wants to hire the guy who made impossible look routine." Marcus smiled, looking out at an audience that finally understood what he'd always known, that sometimes the person everyone overlooks is exactly the one who can save the day. What an incredible story of perseverance and hidden expertise. Marcus Chen proved that experience trumps assumptions every single time. If stories like this inspire you, make sure to hit that subscribe button and join our community of people who believe in the power of overlooked heroes. Drop a comment below telling us about a time when someone underestimated your abilities. We'd love to hear your story. And don't forget to share this video with anyone who needs a reminder that age is just a number when you have the skills to back it up.